Let's start our today's interesting story here at BNN. You won't believe the twists and turns today's tale takes. If you're loving this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more stories. You often don't appreciate what you have until it slips away. That's a common saying, isn't it? I'm Sarah, 32, and my life crumbled because of a single ill-fated conversation that my husband, Mark, wasn't even meant to hear. Now, I'm stuck in a cramped apartment, surrounded by overdue bills, questioning how everything unraveled so swiftly. Mark and I were together for 7 years. Initially, he wasn't my ideal partner. He was more of a dependable choice after I had grown weary of dating irresponsible men. When we began seeing each other, he worked as an HVAC technician, not glamorous, but stable. I was employed at a medical billing office, earning a respectable salary. Together, we managed to purchase a townhouse in a neighborhood where I felt comfortable hosting friends. In the beginning, everything was harmonious. Mark was attentive, always fixing things around the house, and we generally got along well. My sister, Lisa, frequently remarked how fortunate I was to have found such a genuinely good guy. I would smile and agree, but deep down, I always felt I could have done better, as if I had settled too soon while my college friends dated doctors and entrepreneurs. Things shifted when Mark received a promotion to management last year. Suddenly, he was bringing home a significantly larger paycheck, which should have been a blessing. However, with that promotion came a newfound, responsible attitude toward finances that drove me mad. He began scrutinizing every purchase made from our joint account, establishing budgets, and endlessly discussing saving for our future. "Do you really need another pair of shoes, Sarah?" he would ask, looking at my shopping bags. "Remember, we're trying to save for a down payment on a real house." What he failed to understand was that I worked hard for my money too. While he covered the mortgage, car payments, and most utilities, I was responsible for groceries and my own car insurance. I believed that any leftover money was mine to spend as I pleased. Mark, however, acted as if every dollar should go into our joint savings account. Frustrated, I opened a separate account he didn't know about, a stash from each paycheck that allowed me to buy things without facing his scrutiny. I convinced myself that he was being controlling and that his increased income had given him power over me, when in reality, he was simply trying to be responsible for our future. That's when Jennifer joined the billing office, and everything started to unravel. Jennifer was everything I wasn't. Recently divorced, carefree, and seemingly living her best life. Her Instagram was filled with adventures, and unlike my other friends who constantly praise Mark, Jennifer actually listened when I vented about my marriage. "Men like that are so typical," she remarked during our first happy hour. "They get a little power and suddenly think they run everything." My ex was the same way. Finally, someone who understood. We began having lunch together daily, and our conversations quickly shifted to how suffocating my marriage had become. With each discussion, my view of Mark transformed from the caring, hard-working man he truly was into a controlling tyrant who supposedly made my life miserable. One night, after a few drinks, I confided in Jennifer about how Mark had questioned a recent $200 withdrawal from our joint account. "Like I'm some child who needs to report every purchase," I complained, conveniently leaving out the fact that the $200 had gone straight into my secret account, which was now nearly $3,000 strong. Money Mark knew nothing about. "That's financial abuse," Jennifer declared dramatically. "He's trying to control you through money." I nodded eagerly, reveling in how she validated my grievances without hesitation. Meanwhile, Mark kept trying. He suggested weekend movie nights, but I found excuses to avoid them and then complained to Jennifer about how dull his ideas were. When he brought up starting a family, I completely shut down. "We can't afford kids," I snapped, ignoring the fact that his careful financial planning had actually put us in a good position. "We've been saving," he said, confusion clouding his features. "That's literally what we've been working towards." "Maybe your finances," I muttered, thinking of my secret account earmarked for a solo trip to Europe, not for diapers and daycare. Work became my escape. One evening, while working overtime, I found myself alone with Tom from accounting, a tall, single guy with a confident smirk that always made me a little nervous. "Does your husband mind you working so late?" he asked, leaning against my desk. Mark doesn't control my schedule, I retorted sharply, enjoying the way Tom raised his eyebrows, impressed. That night, when I returned home, Mark had waited up for me, dinner carefully prepared. Instead of appreciating his thoughtfulness, I felt irritation bubbling up, convinced his kindness was a trap, another way to make me feel indebted to him. By the time Mark suggested hosting a backyard barbecue for Memorial Day weekend, I was living in a completely different reality than he was. Our marriage wasn't just on different pages. We were reading entirely different books. I spent the entire week leading up to the barbecue whining to Jennifer about how Mark was forcing me to host his work friends when, in reality, he had asked if I was okay with the idea first, and I had mindlessly agreed while scrolling through Instagram, taking Jennifer's advice to heart. I bought several bottles of expensive wine, using our joint account card. When Mark raised an eyebrow at the receipt, I launched into a tearful diatribe about how he wanted to have people over, but didn't want to pay for proper entertaining. The party began at 3 p.m., with neighbors and Mark's coworkers filtering into our backyard. I forced a smile while secretly counting down the minutes until everyone would leave. Mark was in his element, grilling burgers and telling jokes, occasionally looking my way with hope in his eyes, as if he believed this gathering might somehow bring us closer. Jennifer arrived fashionably late, making an entrance in a sundress that turned heads. After 2 glasses of wine, I felt myself relaxing, though my laughter was a little too loud and my stories a bit too animated. As the afternoon progressed, Mark approached our group. "Hey, I have an early meeting tomorrow. Maybe we should start wrapping things up around 8, he suggested quietly. "God, we just got started," I replied loudly enough for everyone to hear. Always so controlling. By 7 p.m., I was on my 4th glass of wine and feeling carefree. Mark had retreated into hosting mode, cleaning up paper plates and ensuring everyone had drinks. Jennifer and I moved to the patio furniture with Tom and his friend Mike. The conversation turned to relationships, with Mike sharing how his ex never understood the concept of personal space. Marks like that, I interjected, even though it was completely untrue, so suffocating sometimes. Tom laughed. "You seem like the independent type who wouldn't put up with that for long." Something about the way he said it made me straighten my posture and toss my hair back. "You have no idea. I'd totally cheat if I knew I'd never get caught. Mark's been so controlling lately. He doesn't even deserve loyalty." Jennifer giggled nervously while Tom's eyebrows shot up. Mike looked away uncomfortably, but I was on a roll now, my words flowing unfiltered. He thinks because he pays most of the bills, he gets to dictate everything. Meanwhile, I'm just biding my time, building my escape fund. I gesture with my wine glass. 7 years with Mr. Reliable, I've definitely put in my time. That's when I noticed everyone's gaze shifting to something behind me. I turned, expecting to see another neighbor or perhaps someone wearing a judgmental expression. Instead, there stood Mark, frozen in the doorway with a stack of paper plates in his hands, an expression on his face I'd never seen before. Neither anger nor hurt, just clarity. Our eyes met for a brief, excruciating moment before he set down the plates and walked back into the house. I should have gone after him immediately. I should have explained that it was the wine talking, that I didn't mean it, but a stubborn part of me thought he needed to stew in it for a bit, to see what happens when he tries to end my fun early. When I finally went inside, Mark was nowhere to be found. The kitchen was spotless, and our bedroom door was closed. I fell asleep on the couch, still in my clothes, convinced we'd talk it out in the morning, and this would just become another story about Mark being too sensitive. The following morning, I woke up with a pounding headache, still in yesterday's attire. The house was eerily quiet. No coffee brewing, no shower running. I checked my phone, 10:37 a.m. Mark's car was in the driveway. I tried calling his cell, but it went straight to voicemail. By evening, with still no word from him, I vacillated between worry and indignation. I texted Jennifer. "Mark disappeared after party." She responded with a wide-eyed emoji. "Maybe he's really upset about what you said." "Please," I replied. "It's not like I actually cheated. It was just talk." Monday morning, I got ready for work as usual, half expecting to find Mark asleep in the guest room. The house remained empty. By lunchtime, with still no contact, a tiny seed of genuine worry began to sprout. That evening, I returned home to find Mark's car in the driveway. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by irritation. I had spent all day worrying, and he couldn't even send a text. The living room looked different somehow. The large framed photo of us from our honeymoon that had hung over the fireplace was gone, leaving just a nail in the wall. So were the books he usually kept on the coffee table. His laptop wasn't in its typical spot. "Mark," I called, my purse resting on the counter. "Where have you been?" I was worried. He emerged from the hallway, carrying a duffel bag. His expression was a mask of calm I didn't recognize. No anger, no tears, just nothing. "I needed some time to think," he said, his voice steady in a way that sent chills down my spine. "And to get some things in order." "What things? Why are you packing a bag? Don't you think you're overreacting a little? It was just some stupid drunk talk." He looked at me then, really looked at me, as if he were seeing someone he didn't recognize. "It wasn't just drunk talk, Sarah. It was the truth. Actually, it was confirmation of what I suspected for a while now." He handed me a folder without another word. Inside were divorce papers, already filled out, my name, his name, a clinical description of assets to be divided. The room seemed to tilt sideways. "This is insane." I managed, my voice shrill. "You're filing for divorce because of one stupid comment at a party?" "No, Sarah," he said, his voice calm. "I'm filing for divorce because you made it abundantly clear that you don't respect me, don't value our marriage, and are actively planning to cheat if the opportunity arises." He shook his head slightly. "You call me controlling. You told our friends you're biding your time and building an escape fund. You said I don't deserve loyalty." I was in disbelief. I was drunk. I was just showing off for Jennifer and Tom. "That's supposed to make it better?" He shook his head again. "Even if you were exaggerating, the underlying sentiment is real. That's how you truly see me, as someone you settle for, someone you're trapped with. Where have you been staying?" I asked, my mind scrambling to grasp the situation. "I've been consulting with a lawyer," he replied, picking up his bag again. "I've already separated our finances. The joint account has enough to cover the mortgage and utilities for the next 3 months, which should give us time to decide what to do with the house." "Separated our finances? You can't just do that." Panic surged within me, sharp and insistent. "That's our money. Actually, I can, particularly since I've been documenting your pattern of withdrawals to your secret account for the past 6 months." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "The account at First Federal, the one you've been transferring money to from our joint account." His eyes were flat and unreadable. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I'm controlling one who watches our finances, remember?" "That's my money," I said weakly. "It's from my paycheck." "We'll let the court decide that," he said, moving toward the door. "I'll be staying at Ryan for now." "You can't just walk out." I shouted, the reality of the situation hitting me hard. "We need to talk about this." He paused at the door. "That's the thing, Sarah. We're past talking. You've been saying everything I needed to hear for months now. I just wasn't listening." Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him with a terrible finality. The next few weeks were a blur of panic, denial, and desperate attempts to regain control. I called Mark constantly at first, leaving voicemails that evolved from angry to tearful to manipulative. He responded only by text with brief and businesslike messages regarding logistics and finances. Even Lisa, whom I expected would take my side, seemed distant when I called to tell her about the separation. "What exactly did you say at the party?" she asked carefully. When I repeated it, there was a long silence. "Sarah," she finally said, "how would you feel if Mark had said that about you?" "It's different." I insisted, feeling defensive. "He's been so controlling lately." "By controlling, do you mean he questions your spending from your joint account? The account you're both supposed to be using to save for your future?" My delusion shattered when I received an email from Mark's lawyer requesting a meeting to discuss asset division. It included a detailed accounting of our finances, with documentation of every withdrawal I'd made to my secret account, dates, times, and amounts. There were also transcripts of text messages between me and Jennifer, where I complained about Mark and labeled him controlling, boring, and stated I'd settle for him. The meeting with the lawyers was excruciating. Mark sat across the table from me, calm and prepared, while I felt increasingly cornered as his attorney presented his terms. They weren't even unfair. The house would be sold, proceeds split, retirement accounts divided, personal property separated. But what stung the most was the cool efficiency with which Mark had approached dismantling our life together. We request that Ms. Mitchell provide an accounting of the funds transferred to her private account, as these were drawn from joint assets, his lawyer stated. Ms. Mitchell's contributions to joint expenses were minimal. The lawyer continued, sliding over a spreadsheet. Mr. Barrett covered approximately 78% of household expenses, allowing Ms. Mitchell to save her personal income while benefiting from his financial support. The numbers were right there in black and white. Mark had been carrying us financially far more than I'd acknowledged, even to myself. As I built my escape fund and complained about his controlling behavior, he had been shouldering the vast majority of our bills. The true humiliation began when word spread among our friends. People I'd vented to about Mark's supposed controlling nature looked at me with undisguised judgment. Even Tom from accounting kept his distance, apparently uninterested in the newly available woman he'd flirted with. 1 year later, here I am, sitting in my tiny one-bedroom apartment surrounded by past due notices. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. We sold the townhouse, split the proceeds, and went our separate ways. I had assumed my share of the house money would last longer, but between first and last month's rent on the apartment, new furniture, and my habit of emotional shopping, it disappeared alarmingly fast. My escape fund, which I'd been so proud of, was gone within 3 months. Supporting myself solely on a medical billing specialist salary is significantly harder than sharing expenses with an HVAC manager. The final blow came last month when Lisa invited me to a family barbecue. Mark was there with Emily, a kindergarten teacher, with a warm smile and an easy way with our nieces and nephews. He looked good, happy, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years, probably because he wasn't walking on eggshells around a wife who constantly undermined him. They bought a house together. Lisa told me later, a charming fixer-upper on Maple Street that Mark had been renovating himself. He'd even received another promotion at work. Later, as I helped in the kitchen, I overheard my mom and Emily talking. "He's so thoughtful," Emily was saying. "Last week, I mentioned wanting to try that new Italian place, and he made reservations for my birthday, without even reminding me." "That's Mark," my mom replied warmly. "He's always been considerate that way." I slipped away before they could see me, a lump forming in my throat. He had been considerate. He'd made mental notes of little things I mentioned wanting or needing, then surprised me with them. He cooked meals, fixed things around the house, and supported my career decisions, even when they meant less money for our goals. Where had my disdain for all that come from? On the drive home, memories flooded back. Not the controlling monster I'd invented, but the patient, loving man who had actually been my husband. The time he stayed up all night with me when I had food poisoning. How he never complained about working overtime, so we could afford the townhouse I wanted. The way he looked at me on our wedding day, like he couldn't believe his luck. In that moment, I finally confronted the truth I'd been running from. Mark hadn't been a problem in our marriage. I had. I'd been so caught up in what I thought I deserved in the life I imagined I should have had that I completely devalued the wonderful life I actually had. I had created a fictional narrative where I was trapped with a controlling man I'd settled for when, in reality, I had been deeply loved by someone I failed to appreciate. As I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex, so different from a neat townhouse community we'd lived in, I saw a notice taped to my door. Probably another late payment. My phone buzzed with a text from the latest guy I'd been seeing, canceling our plans again. The worst part isn't the financial struggle, the loneliness, or even watching Mark find happiness with someone else. It's knowing that I did this to myself. I destroyed something precious because I was too self-absorbed to recognize what I had. If I could go back to that party and take back those careless words, maybe things would be different. But life doesn't work that way. There's no rewind button for the consequences of our actions, no do-over for the people we hurt. All I can do now is face each bill, each empty evening, each reminder of what I lost, and hope that someday I'll learn enough from this mistake to deserve someone half as good as the man I threw away.